Welcome to Malibu.
It's good to be here.
We're going to start with this little company that you co-founded called Qualtrics. Let me just share a couple of things about it for those that haven't been following for the last 17 years. You've bootstrapped for 10 years. You turned down a $500 million offer. You raised $400 million. You hired and ran a 2,300 person team. You're 3 days from an IPO. You sell for $8 billion in cash, which is the largest private enterprise deal of all time and the second largest private acquisition since, well, ever, but since WhatsApp. How are you doing?
It's good, man. Everything's good. I think we had a good year, and obviously stuff happens for a reason. And we were fortunate enough to meet SAP along the way. And I met Bill. I hadn't known Bill like I know every other CEO, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time with Bill McDermott. If any of you haven't done that, it's a real treat. It came fast and furious. And you know, the Germans, people say the Germans are slow. They're not slow. They move pretty quick, so it was pretty cool. Cool outcome.
Let's just take a step back and just sort of understand where we got here. We'll get to the deal. We'll get to how all that came together. This is your first interview since the deal closed last week. So yeah. Big congratulations, first of all.
Thanks,
huge,
man.
amazing accomplishment. So just tell us a little bit. Where was Qualtrics started? Who did you start it with, and how did it start?
Yeah, so I think if people have followed the story, we started in 2002. It was the same year that Atlassian started. It's been a long journey. It's 17 years. We bootstrapped. We were in the shadow of the dot-com bust. We were in Provo, Utah. So, doing a startup wasn't that sexy. It wasn't that, it was something that everyone aspired to do. It was actually the opposite. People were running from them. And, I started with my brother and my father, which is also a recipe for disaster. That never works out.
You're still friends?
We're still friends. They like me a little more now. And then we started by creating a product for the academic market, which, if you think about it, we were allowing academics to go and create data and run analytics on it to take action on it and, get published. And one thing led to another where they started sharing it with their students, and their students took it into the workforce. And, we stayed in a basement for 5 years, completely bootstrapped. We were making about $100,000 a month when we left the basement. And, we built this business in 2007, 8, 9. People started graduating and taking us into the workforce. Then we started going into the enterprise. And, by 2010, we had 1,000 customers. 2012, we were on a $50 million run rate, and we still hadn't raised money. And so if you look at that, you're like, okay, I'm going to start a business with my dad and my brother. I'm going to focus on the academic market where you've got super smart people who pound your product. They're all power users, and they have no money to pay you. Those are like the two worst business models of all time, right? And no VC was going to invest in that. And I think there's a strong lesson that where you start is not where you end up. And if I look at the pivots of Qualtrics along the way, that has been so true. And you've got to do the hard stuff. And so I think having a bunch of money at that time, we had to go through that, and it probably would have hurt us.
I remember. So we went to college together, and I remember very specifically one night playing Halo with you, and saying that I had heard you were in a startup. Or that you'd started a startup, and I leaned over to you and I said, Ryan, I hear you're doing a startup, like tell me about it. And you said something to the effect of, we have a survey product for college professors. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And then I didn't ask another question about it for like 5 years. Which is really dumb. So every time I see her, I remember it. But this was kind of the reaction that you got, right? Other than the customers.
Yeah. And it's been an interesting reaction because, and this is something interesting for all of your portfolio companies who hook the venture capital and the cap table up to the marketing engine, right? Which I think is the dumbest thing in the world. Like, why would you ever pay 5% of your company for a campaign? I mean, I don't think any campaign's worth that. Maybe GoDaddy back in the day that put them on the map. But outside of that, which isn't a recommended one, but you look at it and no one knew who we were. We hadn't done a marketing. My first press release and article was with Forbes in 2012. Think about that. $50 million growing to 2012, we hadn't done that. And then from 2012 on, I don't think we could get more. I mean, we did pretty good in the media, right? I mean, you look at Forbes and Fortune and CNBC and everything we did. I feel like I was like above average in that category. We closed this deal. The first call I get on with Bill the night this closed, I'm with 50 analysts. First question, how did you pay $8 billion for a company we've never heard of? And I'm like, okay, here we are. We built this company. We had 300 articles written about us on the IPO. Like, no one's still heard of us. And so I think that there's this perception that everyone's had that same reaction. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's not one of those companies. And enterprise is that way a lot, that if you don't ride the cow train, typically you don't hear of these companies. And so I think that there's this idea where these founders go out and they're trying to raise money and they're trying to go just to be heard of, and at the end, no one really hears about you anyways. And so just go to work and create revenue, and that's all that matters, because at the end of the day, people, all they care about is cash.
Well, and go ahead. The investors like to hear an entrepreneur talking about making money.
So I know it's a foreign thing, but we are in LA, so maybe we left some of that up.
So I mean, one thing that I've really learned from you over the years is, and there's an example of this, is really that sales, we hear it, but that sales really does solve all problems. And one thing I remember that you used to do in the early days was every month you would take what you would need for the next month, and that was it. And you needed to get sales in, and you needed to get people in the door in order to keep it growing and to keep funding the business. And I can't imagine how stressful that is to know that in 30 days, you're going to basically be out of money. But that was you. I mean, that was sort of, you're driving this, you have this great product culture, but you had this incredible sales culture with you being, how many of the first 50 deals did you actually do yourself?
All of them.
All of them, yeah.
So,
and even your engineering co-founder, he did some sales deals too.
No salesperson's going to come in on a white horse and sell this take the product. And I hear that. I just need someone to come in and help us sell it. If the founders can't sell themselves, there's a problem. We used to have a sweep account. So we were making money early on, and we would every month we would take all of the money in the bank and we would sweep it out to the founders. And so they would actually get the money. This is like a Dan Ariely, like predictably irrational case study, right? It's a simulation. And I would tell them, if we don't sell, you got to give that money back to the company. So in 2011, in Q4, we did $9 million in sales, and $5.5 million was cash.
Wow.
So the sweep, it automatically happened. It would sweep it out to the founders, and then there would be nothing in the bank besides like a couple $100,000. And if we didn't go and get more money or get the money in, we had to give it back. And in 10 years, I never had to write a check back. It's just a lesson. Like, if I had $30 million in that bank, you only bring what you need in life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you figured it out.
Yeah, you just bring what you need. Like, make it so you got to bring more.
2012, you're still not thinking about raising, and your biggest competitor, comes to Provo and offers you $500 million to sell a company that is owned by basically you and your co-founders. How do you turn that down?
There's a lot of argument to how you make the decision to sell and when to sell, and I actually never thought we would go through that process, especially after that 500. It was hard. For me, it came down to a weird thing. All my founders looked at us and me and said, hey, do you want to keep rolling? I just got in the car with my wife and we started driving south, like from Provo, Utah to Las Vegas. And we got about 30 minutes in the road and she's like, look, nothing good's gonna happen if you've got that much money right now. And, and I don't really want you home more. And so the path of least resistance is just to keep going. And we teach this case study at Stanford. It's a class, it was launched Liquidity with Jonathan Levov, and he has all of his MBA students go through this exercise of what you would do in that moment, and they all fail the test because it doesn't come down to any of that. It comes down to like the personal side of the decision you make that's totally outside of any economical rationale. And every founder I know that's gone through this has said the exact same thing. And so I think that in that case, I wasn't done, you know, and this individual, actually I said, I'm not ready to exit. And he said, you know, we had a bunch of VCs swirling as well. And he said, well, if you take VC money, you're exiting as well, just so you know. And he was right. He was right. People don't believe that. The second we go from private to taking outside investment, it is an exit of sort. And you're on that road. And if you look at our first venture raise, which I'm sure we'll get into, I thought we were only going to raise one round, you know, and we raised as clockwork every 2 years since then. And if you would have asked me, I would have put all my money that this was the only round we would ever raise because we didn't need the cash. But then you're in the market, you're out there, you're on the track, you got to go.
So at some point in this, investors start to become aware of what you're building and seeing all the people, you know, going into this basement. And so you start to get offers. Talk about, you know, and all the over $400 million raised. Talk about the things that matter for you as an entrepreneur when you look at investors.
Yeah, I think I can look back and say there's nothing I would have changed about our cap table, and there's nothing I would have changed about the venture capitalists and the VCs that we've got. My brother and I couldn't get aligned on who to take money from. When we turned down the $500 million, we said, hey, if we're going to turn around that much money, we got to go big, and to go big, it can't be run with a sweep account. We've got to actually put everything back in. And, you know, actually, so we took our first round with Sequoia and Excel. It was the largest round in 2012 since 2008. It was a $70 million Series A, and then GitHub came out a month later and raised $100 million. And we negotiated that we could still have distributions in that deal. And then we also negotiated that all that money was coming to the founders, which, you know, they were a little hesitant about because at the time, and this is something that I think people need to understand, like if your founders are going to give up when they get $10 million, get out anyways, right? I think that the one thing that's been great about this journey is we could go all in a way that a lot of our competitors couldn't go all in because we were good. You know, if you think about the journey, we had exits along the way. We raised $400 million and none of it went into the company. We were all in. And I think we ran the company better. I think that we were more aligned with our VCs. I think that we were just taking care of our employees in the right way because we didn't have to get ours. And I think it created a way better culture, way better company, and a way bigger outcome. And I know the risk is, well, your founder's going to be lazy. Well, if that's the case, you've already got a lazy founder. And so, and I'm just talking to the VCs, I know there's non-VCs in the room, but I think it's old school conventional wisdom that has to shift, that I actually personally would never invest if a founder didn't have a massive chunk in the company and they weren't absolutely hungry.
Yeah, when the company sold, the co-founders, you and your dad and your brother, you own almost 50% of the company still, even when it's sold. how did you protect your cap table like that? And what would you? And I think you see a lot. You see all sorts of different spectrum. You see founders that can get there till the end, and they have something, but nobody else has anything else. You get to the end, and they don't have anything, or they have almost nothing.
So it's actually like it's a cascade. And watching the early days, watching 17 years of dilution, and then watching the waterfall at the end, like how it pays out is one of the most fast. It's like I saw the end of the movie of that phase. And, you know, there's probably some, I'll just tell you the lessons I learned, right? So first, the journey's longer than any founder thinks if they're going to do something great. Okay, you know, I see these companies who are giving up 40% of their company and 5 years in, and I'm like, whoa, this isn't going to end well. You know, that person you just recruited for, you know, they're 50 million in revenue. Like, what's the outcome that's gonna come out of that? It might be a good outcome, but that person you recruited and you took away from that company you just lied to. Because you gave them 50%, you've got 3 more rounds. By the time this comes out, that waterfall, plus you've got
and
preferred,
the IPO round.
Yeah, plus you got preferred preference. And by the way, there's this magical round called the IPO that's typically 20% dilution that no one thinks about. That would have been our series, you know, D,
yeah.
Right? Which we were staring at going, oh my gosh, no one told us about it. Well, but it's gonna go up. Yeah, but it's still 20%, right? I was just talking to a founder, a friend of mine on Saturday night, had a magical 33% dilution round in the IPO, right? That's insane. And so all of those employees got hammered on that. I said that so the first thing is it just takes a little bit longer. You need to protect that cap table. And our competitive advantage in our market was our clean cap table. All of my competitors screwed up their cap table. So when they needed to move, they couldn't move. When they needed to make a decision, the founders weren't in control. When they needed to invest and pivot the company, they couldn't do it. When they needed to acquire someone, they couldn't do it. When they needed to raise more money, they couldn't do it. And so a little bit of it was like a war of attrition, who could keep the cap table clean. It's not that we were that much smarter. They were smart people. But they all minimized the outcome that they could have because they messed up their cap table. And so that's the first real lesson. I think in our case, you know, I think we returned the entire fund for 2 of our VCs, which is when they invested, I told them that we would do. So if you put money into Qualtrics, we will return the whole fund. And we did that, which was pretty cool. I just got a note when we were sitting there from pretty famous investor saying, wow, that was special.
Said thanks. It seemed like one of those emails he probably didn't send that much.
Yeah, he was just like, thanks. I was like, all right, cool. Thank you. And then if I look at how it helped when our VCs were taken care of, the founders were taken care of, and the employees did extremely well. We only had $30 million of equity in this deal that went to people who weren't in the building. Think about that. $30 million out of $8 billion were actually employees that weren't with us.
As in, that they had already left, or?
That had already left. So the money went to the right people, and I think, I'm not gonna say how many millionaires we created, but it was definitely, I mean, I know, I just can't say it, but it's north of a couple hundred, I'll just tell you that. And, you know, as I look through that, and I look at our waterfall, it was win, 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 and SAP got a company that is coming in on a good foot because the employees are happy, the founders are happy, like we're rolling. And I think that's the difference of managing that cap table. And I mean, that's a whole longer discussion.
And the investors are sending thank you emails, so they're happy too.
Yeah, here's a thank you email. So the charities really benefited.
So let's fast forward to last year, 2018. You do 500 million in sales. You're in 1 week, your IPO is 13x oversubscribed. And 3 days before you ring the bell, you get acquired by SAP. Why? Why SAP?
So I think that, you know, if you look at where the transition from our company has gone, we 2 years ago, we set out and we said, hey, wow, there's something way bigger than Qualtrics being a survey platform. We're powering 160,000 net promoter studies where people are, 14 airlines are doing all their customer feedback on us. We're doing, our second use case on the platform is our employee experience, which was skyrocketing, growing 143%, that business. So we're like, wait, we have our customer experience, our employee experience, and plus we have, we're powering all the world's research. At the enterprise level, in the academic world, there's something bigger here. And so we created a new category called experience management. We did it in our room. We spent millions of dollars on it. We launched it out, and it worked. Everyone's like, whoa, the same way we have a CRM platform, everyone will have an experience management platform, because all of that data, if we go into a normal organization and they're not on Qualtrics, they've got a different product over here, they got 14 products over here, that data's gone, it's lost, it's not living, it's one and done. And so we're walking into an organization and saying, hey, look, all of that data is together on one single platform for the first time ever. How do we go fast? And when SAP approached us, first of all, Bill got it in 1 second. Right? He got it. He's like, oh my word, this category around experience management and XM is exactly what I want. Which is really interesting. Most founders who have called me on this deal have been like, hey, congrats on the deal. I want to talk about category creation. And that's the number one thing, like how in the world did you guys go from there to there, and how did you get all the development so the product lined up against that? Because that's what we're going to do together. And so I had to ask myself, what's the mission? Is the mission to take XM to the world, or is the mission for me to feel good about going public and being that CEO? And the mission was clearly about taking XM to the world. And when I look at SAP, from a founder's standpoint, first of all, they let you keep your brand, right? Which is different than a lot of organizations, right? I still talk to Keith Crock, and he's about, the Ariba days, and Steve Singh at Concur. Like, those brands are bigger than they ever were, right? And so he's like, look, I'll let you keep your brand, let's go. We'll go blow Qualtrics up. I was like, wow, that's music to my ears. No founder ever wants to hear, hey, we're gonna change the name to something cloud, right? No one wants that, right? Second, he's like, what do you need? Like, we have the best enterprise sales team in the world. And, I just stood up.
I think I've got to pull the tweet from that.
Okay.
Yeah, you and the sales, go ahead.
Yeah, I just stood up in North America last week in front of 8,000 sales reps that are all going to carry Qualtrics in the bag. That's North America, right? I was in the office, and they're in the office around the table, and they're like, hey, we just closed a $150 million deal. And I was like, and they're like, yeah. And I was like, you went like that for a $150 million deal? Like, I would have time out, everyone outside. We're all going to do snow angels in Utah right now, the whole company. And so, the ability to scale and scale globally, my president and COO was over in Europe with another 8,000 employees that same day who are all sellers. And it's like, whoa, what happens if we take XM to the world that way? That's bigger and that's faster on this mission, and that's what I care about. And it's early days, and that's what I'm committed to on the SAP side.
So you did still ring the bell.
I did ring the bell, which is crazy. We rang the bell, and it was unbelievable. And SAP also, if you think about it, they own all the operational data systems of the world. So it's like, ERP that brings you operational data. We're collecting a new data, it's experience data, which is how people felt, not what they did. And if you actually combine the two, that's why you're seeing everything with X&O, XO, XO, which is, gearing up for our Valentine's Day launch. But it actually is really cool, because if I look at all the other potential acquirers that had interest in Qualtrics over the years, they were all one-dimensional, where it was just HR, it was just marketing. But if you look at our platform with SAP, there's success factors, there's, almost every major product is released on the ERP system. So if you look at the product experience, and then, you look at everything they're doing with HANA and everything else, it's all there. So we can go across the entire organization.
So let's talk about the deal. I've heard well, not that I've heard, I've actually seen it, that this maybe happened on a napkin. I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but
yeah, no, it really did. We were at lunch. We were at lunch at Pebble Beach.
Did you shoot a good round?
Yeah, I held my own. But we really were at lunch, and we couldn't get alignment, and I was getting ready to go out on the road the next day. This is the first time I've ever told this story. But and we just couldn't quite get where we needed to get, and I just said, Bill, why don't you and I just talk about this? And we're at lunch, and I just asked the waitress if we could have a piece of paper, and we just agreed to that, and that's what happened. And you got to give it up for Bill, because he said, hey, we're going to do this on trust, and he was willing to really go all in on growing this. And I think definitely going after and helping fund the company and writing a big check is one thing, but the commitment to our employee base and everything else, and then doing exactly what you say you're going to do, is something that has always been attractive to me. And that's always been the number one attribute I wanted to always carry with my employee base and my investors, is when I say I'm going to do something, I go do it. And Bill did exactly what he said he was going to do. And I only want to work with people that do what they say they're going to do. If you're not going to do it, don't say it. And so he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He closed quicker than I even thought. And and I have a lot of loyalty to that. And so I think it's weird that a lot of people, the number one question I get is, what's next? And it's like, I'm going to go take XM to the world. My wife won't let me do another tech company. And this is it. And so I get to still go run Qualtrics with this backing of this army. And everyone's like, yeah, but it's such a big company. Well, there's a lot of downsides to an IPO too. I got to go deal with a bunch of stuff. I mean, tech and work is dealing with some things you don't like to deal with, but if I look at all the positives of this and the impact we can make, it's way bigger than we could have done in the private market or on our own. And then it really just came down to, what's a fair price?
Yeah, and $8 billion. I mean, it's a nice number. I like it. Is there?
Yeah, I had to do the Wall Street breakup tour, which wasn't very fun. When you're 3 days before ringing the bell and everyone's really excited and they've got all their orders and the friends and family round out and all of that, it's not fun calling them up and saying, hey, just by the way, I'm doing a deal with the Germans.
Can you text Morgan Stanley that, or do you have to call? How does that actually work?
I only had an hour, which is kind of crazy. I was supposed to meet them in San Francisco that night to start the final stages of the roadshow. And I told Bill, if I get on that plane, because no one wanted me to go out on the road. And I said, if I get on that plane, I'm not coming back. It doesn't matter if you offer me $100 billion. It doesn't matter. If I get on that plane, I've got all my employees going out to New York. I'm not going to whiplash the employee base. And, he called me at 1:30, I've got an all hands at 3 o'clock. And the all hands is no one knows why we're having an all hands on Sunday at 3. I said, we're either going to be talking about the IPO on Thursday or we're going to be talking about this deal. He calls me at 1:30 and he's like, let's go, man. He's like, I'm driving down. He was up at Sundance Resort in Provo, Utah, and he's like, I'm driving down. We're going to go make this happen. I said, let's go. And then I was like, all right, guys, changing plan. And then you call Wall Street and you're like, hey, we're not doing this. And they're like, well, that number's not, we think it's going to be 11 or 12 or whatever. And I'm like, well, after the dilution, I think it's right back to the same spot. Oh, all right. But they were awesome. What's really cool is they were like super as friends, and we'd been dating bankers for a long time, and Paul Kwan and Morgan Stanley, kind of knew what was going on. And they're real. They can have all the direct listings from here on out.
Well, congratulations. Thanks for coming down. Great job.
Well, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Great. It's great to be here.